Good morning, students. In the last lecture, we discussed the origin of European monetary system and the various stages related to it. Today, I'm going to explain the types or levels of economic integration because, in fact, European monetary system is a form of economic integration. So, first of all, let me just define what economic integration is. It is actually the unification of economies of two or more nations into an international economic entities. That means when two or more nations come together or join together to form one international economic entity, it is called economic integration. Now this integration can be in two ways. One can be negative integration and the other can be positive integration. Negative type of economic integration takes place when the nations remove barriers to trade like tariffs, quotas, subsidies, so that there is equality in terms of pricing. If not equality, then at least reduction in the prices. And what happens when we remove these barriers? The removal of barriers helps to increase the trade between the countries. And talking about positive integration, it involves creation of new frameworks, institutions and policies which would encourage not only trade but also investment. So now we come to the levels of economic integration. You'll after doing this, you will understand that these levels are in stages. I mean, talking about trade agreements, this is the basic stage or the first stage or the minor stage of the level of economic integration. And when we come to political integration, it is the highest level of economic integration. So let's just start this. Trade agreement, it is a kind of economic integration when the nations make an agreement for trade in one or multiple set of commodities. So what happens कि जब economies आपस में decide करती हैं that they have to make some kind of trade agreements, so they are dependent on each other for the supply of material. I'll just give you an example. For example, the European Coal and Steel Community, which was formed in 1952. Now this agreement in this agreement, the United Nations, Belgium, France, West Germany and some other countries agreed to share their coal and steel resources. So this kind of arrangement helps the countries to trade in certain kind of commodities. Now the second type is free trade area. Free trade area is a situation when the economies the tariffs among the members of free trade area are abolished. However, each member maintains its own external tariff against non-FTA countries. Simply defined, all the member countries which are part of free trade area, they will not impose any kind of tariff amongst themselves. But इसके अलावा जो outside countries हैं which are not part of free trade area, they will be charged there will be imports tariffs on that. Okay, they will be required to pay charges on that. So in this also, each member country is free to maintain its own independent policy with regard to non-FTA member countries, like the charges. Each country can decide its own tariffs vis-a-vis the non-free trade area countries. Then is the next level is custom union. This is one step ahead. In this kind of economic integration, the member countries not only abolish internal tariffs but also frame a common external policy. अगर मुझे differentiate करना हो between free trade area and custom union, how will I differentiate? The difference is that in case of free trade area, every country is free to decide its tariff policy with respect to some non-free trade area countries, whereas in case of custom union, all the countries have common set of tariffs to the rest of the world while granting free trade among themselves. Then is common market. Common market has all the features of custom union, and in addition it also abolishes restriction on mobility of factors of production like labor and capital. So what happens here, is that जो economies हैं उनमें आपस में they can there is free mobility of labor and capital. किसके बीच में? The economies which are part of economic integration. Then is economic union. It is further higher as compared to the earlier forms of economic integration. It is a common market in which certain economic policies, just listen this, economic policies, particularly the macroeconomic and regulatory policy, are harmonized. So you can easily see here that this is very high level of integration in which even the economic policies are integrated. So you can understand that the European Union, which we discussed earlier, is the best example of economic union. Then is the political integration. It is the ultimate stage if an economic union moves towards political unification. So, till this stage, we have not come to a situation of political integration or political unification because no country is ready to surrender its sovereignty. Now, we'll discuss the effects of economic integration. The first effect is that it leads to trade creation and trade diversion. I'll explain it with the help of an example. This is the example of trade creation. You can see here that there are three countries: India, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. This is the unit cost of manufacturing a shirt. That is, a shirt can be manufactured at a cost of rupees 200 in India, 160 in Nepal, and 120 in Sri Lanka. Now, if India levies a uniform import duty of 100% on all imports, then what happens? That the cost of importing a shirt from Nepal becomes 320, that is 100% of 160, and from Sri Lanka it is 240, that is 100%, 120 plus 120. So what happens here is that unit cost in Nepal and Sri Lanka becomes higher than India, and hence they cannot compete with goods produced in India. Definitely 320 and 240 are more than 200. So if India and Nepal form a custom union, then tariff on goods imported from Nepal are abolished but continues to levy 100% import duty on import from Sri Lanka. So if it enters into an agreement with Nepal or custom union with Nepal, then what will happen? Look at the situation. The cost of importing the shirt from Nepal would be 160 only, because there would be abolition of this tariff of 100%. So earlier the cost was 160, now again the cost is 160. And because Sri Lanka is not a part of this treaty, not a part of this agreement, the cost is 240. So it is now economical for India to import goods from Nepal at rupees 160, which in this case is the most efficient producer. So this is called trade creation. A trade is created between India and Nepal. This is the result of economic integration. Now let's just do another example, that is how it leads to trade diversity. So let's just take this example. The unit cost is same. You can see this just like the previous example, and unit cost after 50% duty. So where India levied a uniform import duty of 50% on all imports. In this situation, what happens is that it is beneficial for India to import the shirts from Sri Lanka because it is at the rate of 180. How this 240 has come? Because there is import duty of 50%. So 160 plus 50% of 160, that is 240. 120 plus 50% of 120 is 180, right? So in this situation, it is very much beneficial for India to import the shirts from Sri Lanka at the rate of rupees 180, since it is the most efficient option. But what happens after the formation of custom unions? That tariffs are removed on imports from member country, which is Nepal, but continue to be levied on non-member country, that is Sri Lanka. So this is the situation. So what happens after integration is that Nepal, if you compare these three figures, Nepal becomes the most efficient option because it supplies the shirt at cost of rupees 160. See, the cost here is 160, but if there is 50% import duty, it is 240, but after economic integration it remains 160 only. And Sri Lanka, in fact, which earlier was beneficial, now it is not as beneficial as Nepal is. So here the trade, what is happening here is that the trade is getting diverted from non-member country, which is Sri Lanka, to member country, which is Nepal. Okay. So now come to the next effect of economic integration. It is that it leads to economies of scale. You all have done that economies of scale arises when you produce something on large scale, then it leads to reduction in per unit cost. So with economic integration, the size of market enlarges, and this allows one producer to attain economies of scale in production, and as a result there are various internal economies like technical economies, commercial economies, financial economies, etc. Talking about the effect on competition, economic integrate stimulates competition. With the removal of tariffs between member countries, the firms no longer enjoy the security of tariff protected monopoly in domestic market. So they are now faced with a large free market having number of players, and what happens is that this requires the firms to have efficient operations. So जो उनका पैसा which was unnecessarily was wasted on undue competition, now they can spend this money on research and innovation if they are to survive and lead in the market. Next thing is effect on terms of trade. The member countries of regional grouping now have greater bargaining power between themselves as compared to the non-member countries, so definitely it leads to improved terms of trade. With the expansion of markets, new set of opportunities are opened up, both domestic and foreign investment. So definitely this is good as a result of economic integration. Just as I explained you that there is free mobility of capital and labor, so there is harmonization of systems between the countries. And just we discussed that in case of highest level of economic integration, even the fiscal and monetary policies of the economies are integrated. So if there are no uniform fiscal regime, it will lead to problems like tax evasion, skewed investment patterns, etc. Hence it has been often seen that economic integration results in smoothing out the indirect tax disparities. So this was all about economic integration, and the topic of European monetary system is over. In the next lecture I'll explain you the types of exposures and how these types of exposures can be measured.